Welcome, guys. Okay, so it sounds like you guys can hear me. Welcome. For those of you who don't know, my name is Daniela. I'm super duper excited about today's session because I normally give career advice, but I want to take it a step further and help you to understand how to dissect exactly what's going on right now on the market because there's a whole bunch of stuff happening with, tech layoffs, and then people are saying they're hiring. So I just want to alleviate confusion from the horse's mouth. So I will be dissecting what's going on from a market perspective using real market data reports, a Wall Street Journal, and Financial Times. So welcome. Let's jump into it. Okay. So one of the reasons I started this is I just kind of feel like in the Black and brown community, we are typically the last to know. And then we are more susceptible to scams because we really don't understand what's going on. You may see information on social media and it causes you to panic and you don't really know what's going on or who to believe or who to trust or what source is valuable or actually credible. And so I want to pull directly from market reports using what big data, big tech, energy, oil and gas companies use, which is real market reports. So let's talk about what's been happening in the news as it pertains to your career, your money this week. So let's get started. This is the week of June 21, 2022. Today is June 22nd, 2022. And it is a Wednesday. So welcome. So yeah, I just started this because I wanted to provide something in my community where we could actually understand what's going on and put it into real actionable items. I understand that Wall Street Journal can be overwhelming. Sometimes the lingo can be a little bit confusing. So I wanted to create a space for us to be able to look at it, dissect it, and then give you action items to take from that. Okay, so let's get started. First things first. So I'm going to break down, market updates. One, you need this to make decisions with clarity and intent. I always see these posts from people like, oh, well, I don't know how to pivot into tech. I don't have money for a resume. I don't have this. I don't know what to put in my LinkedIn. I don't know how to use this. Recruiters are not getting back to me. It sounds like if this is you, you're just kind of running amok. You're just applying for jobs. If you see openings, you don't have any strategy. And so one of the reasons why I am a huge avid and a reader of, Market Watch, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, I'm constantly dissecting that information so that I provide my clients with real strategy that kind of foolproofs them in the market. And so you have to be clear, one, on what's going on. Then that way, when you make your pivot or your transition, you're doing it with full intent. It's not just taking a stab in the dark. So we're going to get into what's happening in the bigger industries. Tech is not the only industry that hires people in droves. We're going to talk about what's happening in tech, energy, oil and gas, and how this stuff can impact your career decisions, what you need to consider. Do you have an exit plan if you're trying to go to these new companies you heard about? And if you do, what does that plan look like? How do we make sense of what the market is telling us? So let's jump right into that. If you're a business owner, this is going to be very helpful to you. A lot of the times that African Americans have these side hustles or we have businesses, we don't really know where the money is. And when I say money, I'm talking about 7-figure type of strategy. We don't really know where that stuff is. And that's simply because we're out of touch and out of tune with what's happening in real time on the marketplace. What are these big tech companies looking for when they seek out contractors? What kind of contractors? These are the things that I like to cover because no one really dives into this. We just kind of see people posting random information about you need to do this with your resume or you need to do this with your LinkedIn profile. So let's actually go to see what the market says. So first things first, I want to kind of dissect and break down is oil and gas. For those of you who know me, this is my industry that I come from. My background is in engineering. And so oil and gas is not, a lot of people think, you got to hurry up and get out of oil and gas. Actually, oil and gas professionals are probably amongst some of the hottest on the market because the focus right now on oil and gas is like, let's read what they're saying, right? Let's look at it. Politicians want greater energy independence, right? They also want to cut carbon emissions. What this means is they want to find more greener paths towards doing business. They want to cut down on pollution, CO2, carbon emissions. Those are the things that warm up the earth and make it overheated and destroy the ozone layer. And so a lot of government officials, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, okay, this is not biased information. This is actually real. And this is my clip from Wall Street Journal. Why you need to know this as a professional is because if you're in oil and gas and you're saying, I want to stay in oil and gas, I just want to go where the money is. Everybody in oil and gas and energy, whether it's green energy, which is called renewable energy, and then oil and gas would be considered non-renewable energy, right? Because once you use that source, that's it. What they're concerned with is like, okay, politicians on both sides, Libertarian, Republican, Democrats, they are pushing for companies to cut their emissions. It's not so much that everybody all of a sudden cares about the earth. This is a way for the government to start to tax corporations or penalize them for not cutting down their carbon emissions. And so it's very important that you understand what's happening on the market, because when you get into these interviews for these leadership roles or for these top paying roles, they're going to want to know how you understand risk, right? How have your projects that you've worked on in the past, have you ever had to have some type of, interaction with regulatory, right? Because that would be government, regulatory, EPA, FERC, PHMSA. They want to know if you're fluent in that, because this is where they're hurting. Typically, where industry is hurting, that's where they're going to hire you the quickest, or they're going to hire and pay top pay, because this is the problem that's pressing for them right now. And so are there opportunities in oil and gas? Absolutely. We're looking at people who we're looking at governments from the UK to the US that are trying to find ways to maximize off these companies. Hey, Walmart, you don't have a plan to, go carbon neutral. The only organization that I've seen is Shell and Amazon. Amazon actually has a carbon neutral plan in place. And so they're getting those tax cuts and benefits. But other companies that are putting out a lot of emissions, a lot of oil and gas companies, they have to jump on board. So what does that translate to? If you have a small business or anything like that, and you don't understand how your service goes into that area, you're probably going to suffer for contracts right now. So that is the language. So when I say that's what they want to know, carbon emissions, that's the word of the day. CO2, right? Greener paths for energy. Talk about in your resume and in your LinkedIn, any projects that you've worked on where it had to do directly to with carbon emissions. If you don't call it carbon emissions, do you call it net zero plans or green path or green pathfinding? Some people call it going green initiatives, environmental impact. When you're talking from the oil and gas industry, if you're talking with a sense of understanding environmental impact, that's going to resonate not in just oil and gas, but it's also going to resonate with hydro companies, solar companies, windmill companies. All of these solar energy companies and these green energy companies are going to want you because you understand how to communicate the risk if people don't switch over to green energy. So that is the word of the day for those of you who are in oil and gas, okay? My computer always does this. So let's talk about this a little bit more in depth while I restore my computer. The next thing I want you to consider, one second, I'm just doing a refresh. Okay, the next thing I want you to consider when you look at your resume, if you're all over the place talking about processes and all this other stuff, and you're not getting a hit and you say, Daniela, I am oil and gas, that's probably why you're not hearing anything back, because you're not speaking into something that actually matters to them. So remember, when you know the language and you know the lingo and you know where your industry is suffering, you have a tendency to speak right into that dollar. You have a tendency to speak right into what matters. And you're going to find that you probably see a lot more in recruiter engagement, because that is where oil and gas is concerned right now. Carbon emissions. That's a part of every project, no matter what. Actual gas, natural gas. All of these people are concerned. PG&E pipeline, Exxon, all of them are concerned with how do we cut carbon emissions. And so if you do not understand the market from that perspective, it's going to be really hard for you to understand or really kind of just find. It's going to be hard for you to really just kind of find your way. One second, guys. I'm just trying to refresh Everything in the world is going wrong right now. Okay. I'm just trying to open back up my presenter view. Okay. My whole thing is just being really weird. Present. Okay, so I'm going to leave it that way. So there's that, right? We talked about that. So the word of the day is carbon emissions. This is where everybody's concerned. That's where the money is in oil and gas. So let's jump into tech. Apple, Google, and all of these cloud database type of organizations in tech, what they're facing are antitrust issues, right? And so I'm not wanting you to scan through these things and put this stuff in your resume. You really have to read and apply context clues and really dissect what they're saying. The UK's competition regulator wants to investigate market power, and it says Apple and Alphabet, which is Google, exert over some mobile device software, ramping up global antitrust scrutiny of the largest U.S. technology companies. A lot of people always ask me, Daniela, how can I pivot into tech? I want you to really think about this. If Google and Apple, Alphabet, all of these companies are having issues with antitrust, they're not looking for more software engineers. They're not looking for more Scrum masters. They're not looking for that. That's not what this article is about. This article is about probably, hey, we need professionals in the area of what? If you really read and dissect what this is saying, it's saying, if you take your time, they're having an issue where, I don't know if you saw when our U.S. government showed a distrust in Facebook. And so what that meant is they are wanting people, no matter what industry you come from, who understand regulatory laws. I don't care what side of the industry you come from, manufacturing, logistics, anything. Remember, manufacturing, logistics, environmental impact, social, all of these things have to do with antitrust. It doesn't matter what your background is. It's not so much what do you need to hurry up and lie about on your resume so you can pivot into tech. You need to understand where tech is concerned when it comes to your skill set. And so any type of regulatory background would be really good to talk about in tech, just as well as oil and gas, because they're trying to get transparency in place with a lot of these tech companies. And when we say regulatory, what are your relationships with working with government? If you've worked with big government, if you've worked in government, if you've worked with the local school district, anything like that, they're going to want to hear about that. And so when we dive a little bit deeper into antitrust, we're also talking about risk. We're also talking about customer portfolio. These are the things that you need to be saying, okay, when I read Wall Street, when I look at Financial Times, when I look at Market Watch, all of these economy reports are saying this is where these companies are putting their money. And common sense would tell you if this is where they're putting their money, that also means they're putting people in place who specialize in these areas. And this has nothing to do with software coding, C++, JavaScript. This has nothing to do with the tech side. This is the business side of tech, like I have been preaching about for the longest. And so if you understand the business side of tech, you're probably going to find more opportunities. And so when you look at your profile, are you getting to the point of what you do as it concerns the things that we just discussed today? If you're going to go into your LinkedIn and start putting antitrust, that recruiter is not going to know what you're talking about. So what I don't want people to do is think, okay, they say antitrust, I'm going to go put that in my LinkedIn. No, that's not what they're asking you. Antitrust is the overall issue. What you have to ask yourself is, where in my skills will my skill set contribute to problem solving that issue? That's regulatory, that's risk evaluation, that's also customer strategy, that's also networking with key stakeholders, that's also strategic partnerships. You have to understand how to read this and also take away what that impacts, okay? That's why I decided to start doing these, because I kind of feel like when I read the comments, people are all over the place. What's happening in tech and energy? Well, we'll talk about that in the Patreon. We'll go a little bit deeper, where I'm going to break down a little bit more, because these are not the only stories. These are just the top ones. We're going to talk about each company's portfolio right now. So maybe if you're trying to pivot into Microsoft, you don't know what resonates with them. We're going to talk about that inside the Patreon. Also inside the Patreon, I want to talk about oil and gas. It is not a dead industry. Oil and gas is very much still lucrative. So everybody's always talking about big tech. You need to be focused on big industries, okay? And that's tech, energy, and oil and gas. Those are some of the biggest industries right now because they have the biggest laws and regulatory efforts behind them. If you want to make sure you like, follow, and subscribe. This was a dry run. I just kind of wanted to see if you guys would get anything from this. I really would love it to hear back from you guys, get feedback to understand if this is helping you or not. I do want to start doing these like on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays to make sure everybody is up to date and up to speed on what's happening in the marketplace. I'm going to run this again on Friday. I hope that you guys join. If you say, hey, Daniela, I don't know, my Patreon link is in the description. And so in the Patreon, you're going to get access to all of the live classes. And when I come off of this, I'm going to go back into my Patreon and do an extended version. So that way, for those of you who are on the job market, or maybe you have a small business and you're trying to extend your contract opportunities, you will be able to do so there. Until next time, God bless. Make sure you follow me on all my platforms. My handle is @Slatepedia. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm under Daniela Green. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have, guys. And so if you have any questions or comments, just drop them below on the video and I'll be coming back to check. God bless.